Doppelgangers. Mirror images, connected reflections. Prologue. Splintered origins. In the late 1980s, Xavier Blackwood cut an impressive figure across the American pharmaceutical landscape. A brilliant biochemist with ruthless business acumen, he navigated boardrooms and research labs with equal command. His career at Helios Pharmaceuticals took him from coast to coast, opening research facilities and negotiating contracts. Handsome, charismatic, and devastatingly intelligent, Xavier left an impression everywhere he went, and not just professionally. Xavier's philosophy was simple: life was meant to be experienced fully, without encumbrances. Commitment was a cage he refused to enter. Children were anchors he had no intention of carrying. He made this clear to every woman he pursued, and there were many. Some saw this as a challenge, believing they could change him. Others accepted his terms, thinking they wanted the same freedom. All discovered, eventually, that Xavier Blackwood's heart had walls no one could scale. Amanda Morgan, a brilliant research scientist in Seattle, fell for Xavier during his 6-month project at Helios West Coast Research Hub in 1989. Independent and career-focused herself, she believed their affair would be brief but memorable. When she discovered her pregnancy after Xavier's departure, she made her choice without hesitation: she would raise the child herself, expecting nothing from a man who had been clear about his intentions. 2 years later in Philadelphia, Elizabeth Daniels, a marketing executive contracted to rebrand Helios' flagship products, experienced a similar whirlwind romance with Xavier. Like Amanda, Elizabeth chose to raise her daughter independently, telling herself that her child would thrive with one dedicated parent rather than two conflicted ones. Both women eventually shared minimal information about Xavier with their daughters, each thinking it kinder than the full, harsh truth of his deliberate absence. What neither woman knew was that Xavier had scattered similar genetic echoes across the country, children who would grow up shaped by his absence, carrying his amber eyes and analytical mind without his guidance or knowledge. Part 1. Parallel Lives. Elise Morgan, the pragmatic visionary. Growing up in Seattle's rain-soaked landscape with a single mother who worked long hours in pharmaceutical research, Elise Morgan learned self-sufficiency at an early age. Amanda Morgan, brilliant and loving but often absorbed in her work, created a home environment that valued intelligence, independence, and emotional restraint. "The world won't hand you anything, Elise," Amanda would say. "You must calculate what you want and pursue it relentlessly." When Elise broke her left wrist at 8 after falling from a playground structure while playing alone, Amanda implemented systematic changes, scheduling play dates, hiring after-school sitters, and creating detailed emergency protocols. The incident taught young Elise that problems were to be analyzed and solved, not dwelled upon emotionally. At 12, Elise discovered a fragile butterfly trapped in her bedroom window. As she attempted to free it, the delicate creature's wing tore beneath her fingers. The feeling of those paper-thin wings disintegrating haunted her dreams for weeks, sparking a phobia that would follow her into adulthood, a visceral fear of beautiful, fragile things that could be destroyed by careless handling. Amanda rarely spoke of Xavier, referring to him only as the beautiful mistake, a brilliant man who had briefly illuminated her life before continuing on his predetermined path. "He gave me you," she would tell Elise during rare moments of maternal tenderness. "For that, I can forgive the rest." When cancer claimed Amanda during Elise's final year at MIT, the loss carved a hollow space in Elise's chest that no academic achievement could fill. Armed with her mother's life insurance and her own fierce intellect, Elise set out to make her mark on the financial world, excelling at investment banking before catching the attention of headhunters from Meridian Enterprises. What drew her to Meridian and its headquarters in the gleaming metropolis of Crestfall City was not just the prestigious CFO position or the generous compensation package. It was a compelling, inexplicable pull, like a tuning fork vibrating to an inaudible frequency, that Elise rationalized as career ambition but felt, in her quieter moments, like something more profound and mysterious. Catherine Daniels, the composed strategist. In Philadelphia's affluent suburbs, Catherine Daniels grew up in material comfort tempered by emotional restraint. Elizabeth Daniels balanced her high-powered marketing career with dedicated single motherhood, creating a structured environment where expectations were clearly defined and excellence was the baseline. Appearances matter, Catherine, Elizabeth would remind her daughter. Control what you can control. When Catherine broke her left wrist at 8 after slipping on marble stairs during a client dinner at their home, Elizabeth responded by hiring an etiquette coach to teach Catherine proper deportment and implementing household safety measures. The incident taught young Catherine that vulnerability was to be managed and concealed behind careful preparation and grace. At 11, during a garden party at a colleague's estate, Catherine encountered a butterfly garden. Fascinated at first, she became overwhelmed when dozens of the creatures surrounded her, their unpredictable movements and delicate, fluttering wings triggering an inexplicable panic. The memory lingered, becoming a peculiar phobia she mentioned to no one. Elizabeth spoke of Xavier only once, after several glasses of wine on Catherine's 18th birthday. "He was brilliant, charismatic, and dangerous to know," she said, her usual composure slipping momentarily. He knew exactly what he was and made no apology for it. I respected that, even as I recognized we wanted fundamentally different lives. During Catherine's second year at the Wharton School of Business, Elizabeth was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. Catherine put her trademark organizational skills to work, researching treatments, coordinating care, and keeping her mother comfortable while maintaining her academic standing. When Elizabeth passed 3 years before Catherine's arrival at Meridian, she left her daughter a substantial inheritance, emotional restraint as a core value, and questions about identity that no amount of planning could resolve. Catherine's journey to Meridian Enterprises in Crestfall City followed a meticulously plotted career trajectory: prestigious consulting firm, strategic leadership roles, and finally, the SVP of Operations position at Meridian. Yet beneath the calculated career moves lay an inexplicable certainty that this particular city, this specific company, was where she needed to be, a feeling so unpragmatic that Catherine buried it beneath logical justifications about career advancement and industry prestige. Xavier Blackwood, the brilliant deserter. While his daughters grew into accomplished women on opposite coasts, Xavier Blackwood continued his ascent through the pharmaceutical industry. The patterns established in his 30s, brilliant work, charismatic leadership, and emotional detachment, hardened into permanent characteristics as he advanced into middle age. With each promotion and accolade, Xavier reinforced his personal philosophy: attachments were liabilities. He watched colleagues struggle with family obligations, saw promising careers derailed by parental responsibilities, and noted how personal entanglements complicated clear thinking. He considered himself enlightened for avoiding these traps, never recognizing the profound hollowness growing within him. Xavier's ambition drove him to create Blackwood Pharmaceuticals in his late 40s, focusing on lucrative specialty medications. The company thrived under his ruthless efficiency, generating wealth that allowed him eventual early retirement to an exclusive Arizona community where he could pursue intellectual interests without interference. The possibility that his genetic material was scattered across the country occasionally surfaced in his thoughts but was quickly dismissed. He had been clear with each woman about his intentions: whatever choices they made afterward were not his concern. This calculated detachment, mistaken by Xavier for rational thinking, gradually calcified his emotional capacities, leaving him increasingly isolated despite his material success. What Xavier could never understand was how his deliberate absence had shaped lives as profoundly as his presence might have done, creating in his unwitting daughters a hunger for connection that would eventually lead them to each other. Part 2. Collision Course at Meridian. The corporate landscape. Meridian Enterprises stood as the crown jewel of Crestfall City's financial district, its 60-story glass tower reflecting clouds by day and stars by night. Founded as a traditional financial services firm, it had evolved under visionary leadership into a diversified powerhouse with interests in technology, healthcare funding, and sustainable development. CEO Marcus Harrington, known for unconventional management philosophies, had built Meridian's executive team with an eye for complementary talents rather than similar backgrounds. When the positions for CFO and SVP of operations opened simultaneously, Harrington's talent acquisition team conducted nationwide searches that ultimately identified Elise Morgan and Catherine Daniels as ideal candidates, unaware they were setting the stage for an extraordinary reunion. Their arrivals at Meridian, separated by only 3 weeks, barely caused ripples in the corporate environment until their first face-to-face encounter in the executive elevator, a moment that would alter the course of both their lives and, eventually, reshape Meridian itself. The recognition. The executive elevator on the 38th floor of Meridian Tower was reserved for upper management, offering panoramic views of Crestfall City through glass walls as it ascended to the executive suites. On a crisp autumn morning, Elise stepped inside, mentally reviewing quarterly projections, when the doors slid open on the 39th floor. Catherine entered, eyes on her tablet, before looking up to acknowledge her elevator companion with a professional nod, a gesture that froze midway as recognition slammed into both women with physical force. The moment stretched between them like an elastic band pulled taut. Same height, same almond-shaped amber eyes, same chestnut hair cut in an elegant shoulder-length bob, same small scar above the right eyebrow. Not sisters, twins, to all appearances. Excuse me, Catherine stammered, a rare break in her famously composed demeanor. This is impossible, Elise finished, the word hanging between them. The elevator continued its ascent, but something fundamental had shifted in the universe. Both women, trained to analyze and strategize, found themselves without rational explanation for the mirror image before them. When the doors opened at the executive floor, they exited in opposite directions, each needing distance to process the impossible encounter. Around them, the corporate machinery of Meridian continued its relentless pace. Their identical appearance became the whispered fascination of the executive floor. Some assumed they were long-lost sisters playing an elaborate charade. Others suggested plastic surgery, a bizarre form of corporate climbing. CEO Harrington joked about seeing double in board meetings, entirely unaware of the profound ripple effect beginning to spread through his organization. For weeks, they maintained a polite professional distance, each unnerved by the other's existence. Their colleagues noticed they instinctively avoided the same spaces, as if the universe might implode if they stood too close to one another, a mutual avoidance that became its own form of connection. Until the night of the quarterly earnings celebration, held on Meridian Tower's rooftop terrace beneath a canopy of stars, when fate once again engineered their meeting. Part 3. Recognition and Revelation. Initial connections. The quarterly earnings celebration showcased Meridian's success and Catherine and Elise's individual contributions. Both had proven themselves exceptional, Catherine streamlining operations with remarkable efficiency, Elise implementing financial strategies that had increased profitability beyond projections. Yet both found themselves drifting away from colleagues and toward the terrace's edge, where city lights stretched to the horizon like earthbound stars. It was there, in a moment of relative quiet, that Catherine made the decision to address the elephant in the room. "We should probably talk about it," she said, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. "Before the speculation drives everyone insane." Elise accepted the glass with a nod, her analytical mind already cataloging similarities in their mannerisms and speech patterns. "I was raised in Seattle. Only child. Father unknown, mother deceased. You?" "Philadelphia. Only child. Father unknown, mother deceased 3 years ago. Cancer." "Mine too. 5 years ago." A brief exchange, yet it launched them on a journey of discovery that would unfold over the coming months, calculated, careful conversations that revealed increasingly impossible coincidences. Both had attended Ivy League schools on scholarships, Elise at MIT, Catherine at Wharton. Both had broken their left wrists at age 8 under different circumstances. Both harbored the same inexplicable phobia of butterflies, a detail so peculiar it defied rational explanation. Both had married briefly in their 20s to men named Michael who ultimately betrayed their trust, Elise's husband with a research assistant, Catherine's with a client. "It's statistically impossible," Elise insisted one evening, 6 months into their cautious friendship, as they reviewed a spreadsheet of their matching life events in her minimalist condo. "We need answers." Catherine, who had built her career on turning unknowns into actionable data, nodded decisively. "DNA testing. Whatever we find, we face it together." The results, arriving on a rainy Thursday morning as they sat together in Catherine's elegantly appointed living room, confirmed what they had begun to suspect: they were half-sisters, sharing 25% of their DNA. A father in common. Xavier Blackwood, Catherine read from the report, the name both strange and somehow familiar on her tongue. "My mother mentioned him once, said he was brilliant, charismatic, and dangerous to know." "Mine called him the beautiful mistake," Elise said quietly. "Said he blew through her life like a hurricane." The name gave shape to the shadow that had lingered over both their lives, a puzzle piece long missing suddenly found. With typical efficiency, they redirected their professional skills toward a new project, understanding Xavier Blackwood and the full scope of his legacy. The investigation. Their parallel investigation revealed Xavier Blackwood as a pharmaceutical executive whose career took him coast to coast throughout the late 80s and early 90s. Articles in industry publications painted him as innovative and driven. Business profiles described his magnetic leadership style. Photographs showed a tall man with striking amber eyes, and an expression of confident detachment that both women recognized from their own mirrors. Through social media searches, public records, and eventually private investigators, they discovered 3 more half-siblings spread across the country: a brilliant neurosurgeon in Chicago, a tech entrepreneur in Austin, and a renowned concert pianist in Boston. All with the same amber eyes. All raised by single mothers. All with stories of a charismatic father who never appeared. "He has a pattern," Catherine observed one evening, studying photographs of the siblings they hadn't yet met. "He's created a family he never wanted. Or perhaps couldn't handle," Elise suggested, still searching for meaning in abandonment. Their investigation led them to Blackwood Pharmaceuticals, the company Xavier had built and eventually sold for a fortune that financed his early retirement. Former colleagues described him as brilliant but detached, impressive but ultimately unknowable, a man who kept his professional and personal lives entirely separate. When they finally tracked Xavier to the Palms, an upscale retirement community in Scottsdale, Arizona, both women took personal days from Meridian, booked flights, and prepared themselves for answers, good or bad. What they couldn't prepare for was the profound indifference they would encounter. The confrontation. Xavier Blackwood at 72 retained the handsome features and commanding presence evident in old photographs, though his once dark hair had silvered and lines had deepened around his eyes, their eyes. They found him in the community's lavish bar, nursing a scotch and reading financial news on a tablet. His reaction to their introduction was not shock or denial or even guilt, emotions that might have indicated some human connection to the consequences of his actions. Instead, he displayed mild curiosity, as if they were an unusual research finding rather than his flesh and blood. "Of course I remember them," he said, sipping scotch, appearing entirely untroubled by their existence. "Beautiful women, your mothers. Smart too." "Did you know?" Elise asked, her voice tight. "About us?" I suspected there might be consequences. His smile didn't reach his eyes. But that was their choice, wasn't it? They knew what I was offering. Which was what, exactly? Catherine's voice was ice. A good time. Nothing more. He shrugged. I told them all the same thing, I wasn't father material. Never pretended otherwise. The meeting lasted 30 minutes of increasing disappointment as Xavier revealed the hollowness behind his impressive facade. He asked minimal questions about their lives, expressed no regret for his absence, and showed more interest in his next drink than in the daughters sitting before him. They left with the certainty that Xavier Blackwood was exactly as their mothers had described, brilliant, charismatic, and ultimately dangerous to know, not because he was cruel or violent, but because he was fundamentally incapable of the connection that humans need to thrive. In the rental car, Catherine gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. I spent my whole life wondering about him, she said. Imagining excuses, tragedies, circumstances that kept him away. And it was just selfishness, Elise finished. Simple as that. They drove in silence back to their hotel. That night, sharing a bottle of wine by the pool under the vast Arizona sky, something shifted between them, the final barriers of professional caution and emotional reserve dissolving in the face of shared disappointment and mutual understanding. The science says we're half-sisters, Catherine said quietly. But it feels like more. Doppelgangers, Elise smiled. Mirror images. With the same broken part made whole by finding each other. Part 4, Forging Connection. Professional Symbiosis. Back at Meridian, they no longer avoided each other. Their eerie similarity became their strength, finishing each other's sentences in meetings, presenting unified fronts on financial strategies. The executive team learned quickly, convince one, or convince neither. CEO Marcus Harrington, initially bemused by their connection, soon recognized the value of their synchronized thinking. When they jointly proposed a restructuring of Meridian's healthcare investment division, combining Catherine's operational expertise with Elise's financial acumen, the results exceeded all projections. You two think differently together than apart, Harrington observed during a quarterly review. It's like you've found a frequency no one else can access. Their colleagues adjusted to their unconventional bond, and the initial gossip transformed into respect for their professional synergy. The women who had once carefully maintained separate spaces now operated as a unified force, their complementary skills enhancing Meridian's position in the market. What no one at Meridian fully appreciated was how their professional alliance was merely the visible manifestation of a deeper personal connection blooming outside office hours. Building family. They bought condos in the same building, Elise on the 24th floor, Catherine on the 26th. Started a tradition of Sunday brunches, alternating between their homes. Planned holidays together, creating new rituals to replace the family traditions neither had experienced. More significantly, they reached out to their other half-siblings, creating connections Xavier had never intended. Dr. Sophia Blackwood Chen, the Chicago neurosurgeon, was initially skeptical but eventually flew to Crestfall City for a weekend that ended in tears and laughter. Alexander Blackwood Jones, the Austin tech entrepreneur, integrated them into his life with enthusiastic embrace. Lydia Blackwood Martinez, the concert pianist, invited them all to her performance at Carnegie Hall, where they occupied the front row as her chosen family. What began as 5 separate individuals, shaped by the same absence, gradually transformed into a network of support and understanding, a chosen family bound by shared DNA and the mutual experience of navigating life with a Xavier-shaped hole at its center. He never intended this, Alexander observed during their first group vacation, a week at his lake house in the Texas Hill Country. As finding each other, becoming family. Perhaps that's the beautiful irony, Sophia replied. His absence created the space for something he could never provide. For Elise and Catherine, discovering these siblings expanded their understanding of themselves, traits and tendencies they had attributed to their mothers now revealed as Xavier's genetic legacy. His analytical mind. His focus and determination. His ability to compartmentalize. But where Xavier had used these qualities to isolate himself, his children chose to employ them in service of connection. The deeper bond. Do you ever wonder, Catherine asked one evening as they watched the sunset from her balcony, city lights beginning to twinkle below, if we were drawn to the same company, the same city, for a reason? I stopped believing in coincidence when I saw your face, Elise replied. Something was pulling us together. Maybe the universe balancing his selfishness with something beautiful. Their shared blood had given them the same features, the same mannerisms, the same analytical minds. But what they built together, the sisterhood neither had experienced, the family they'd created from fragments, that was entirely their own creation. In the years that followed, their bond only deepened. They supported each other through professional challenges and personal milestones. When Catherine briefly dated a colleague who proved emotionally unavailable, Elise provided the perspective needed to end the relationship before significant damage occurred. When Elise considered a prestigious job offer from a competing firm, Catherine helped her negotiate a counteroffer at Meridian that acknowledged her true value. Together, they navigated the complex landscape of adult sibling relationships with their newfound brothers and sister, creating boundaries, establishing traditions, and learning the language of family they had never been taught. Most profoundly, they helped each other recognize and address the subtle ways Xavier's absence had shaped their approaches to life: Catherine's meticulous control of her environment, Elise's reluctance to depend on others, their shared wariness of emotional vulnerability. "We have his eyes," Catherine said softly one evening, years after their first meeting. "But not his heart," Elise finished. "Never his heart." Epilogue. Legacy transformed. 5 years after their first encounter in the executive elevator, Elise Morgan and Catherine Daniels had transformed not only their own lives but Meridian Enterprises itself. Their collaborative leadership style had inspired structural changes throughout the organization, emphasizing partnership over hierarchy and connection over competition. When CEO Marcus Harrington announced his retirement, the board unanimously selected them as co-CEOs, an unprecedented structure that acknowledged their unique symbiosis and proven results. Under their joint leadership, Meridian expanded its philanthropic initiatives, focusing particularly on organizations supporting single parents and educational opportunities for their children. Their extended family grew closer with each passing year. Dr. Sophia Blackwood Chen developed a groundbreaking neurological treatment informed by discussions with her siblings about their shared experiences. Alexander Blackwood Jones created a tech platform connecting half-siblings separated by circumstances beyond their control. Lydia Blackwood Martinez composed a symphony titled Reflections, which critics hailed as a profound exploration of identity and connection. When news reached them of Xavier Blackwood's passing, a quiet death in his sleep at the Palms, with no one at his bedside, they gathered together at Catherine's condo to acknowledge the complicated legacy of the man who had unknowingly connected them. "He lived exactly as he chose," Alexander observed. "Complete freedom, no attachments." "And died the same way," Sophia added softly. "Perhaps that was his greatest fear," Lydia suggested. "Not responsibility, but vulnerability. In trying to avoid pain, he missed everything meaningful," Elise reflected. "While we found meaning precisely because we were willing to risk pain," Catherine concluded. They raised their glasses not to Xavier's memory but to the family they had forged from his absence, 5 individuals who had transformed isolation into connection and abandonment into belonging. A living testament to the human capacity to create beauty from brokenness and wholeness from fragments. Xavier Blackwood had given them his eyes, his intellect, his drive, and then his absence. In turn, they had created something he could never have imagined, a family bound not by obligation but by choice, not by fear but by love, and strengthened rather than diminished by the very vulnerability he had spent his life avoiding. In the gleaming glass tower of Meridian Enterprises, the legacy of Xavier Blackwood had been transformed from selfishness into connection, a reflection not of what he was, but of what his children had chosen to become. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more. And don't forget those post notifications for the next Hood Tales installment.